Very much for coming here on September 4th. Here in 2015, exactly 211 years after Richard Somers died in Tripoli, fighting America's first war against Arab terror under President Thomas Jefferson. So America's war against jihad and Arab terror didn't start with September 11th. Didn't start with the invasion of Iraq. It started the day this country was founded in 1783. For the first 15 years, Americans paid bribes and tribute to have our people released and kept safe from the terror. But then in 1798, Americans said, millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. And all the money we were paying in bribes and tribute, which was 10% of the federal budget for the first 15 years of America. Instead of paying bribes to the Muslim terrorists, we paid that money to build a Navy, and Richard Somers at age 20 was one of the first people to join. Before I go into more detail, first of all I want to thank everybody who's here with Liberty and Prosperity for making this possible. Mark Hutchinson, we have Charles Fisher who put together the beautiful wreath. In fact, I'd like everybody here from Liberty and Prosperity to identify yourself, starting with Clarence. Clarence Abbott.
Jerry Zarnecki, Egg Harbor Township. My wife.
Nancy Sanaki, Jackie Fadaben, Leo Ransone. Marlene Abbott. Jenny Nelson. And we have Eileen Wood. We have Shay Delita, Mark Hutchinson, and Charles Fisher. We have guest Kirk Conover, who is providing the insurance, and we won't repeat all the difficulties we had to hold this event, but he also made this event possible. Now, thank you. Now, to quote Abraham Lincoln, we are not here to honor Richard Somers. We're not here to dedicate him because Richard Somers honored himself by the deeds he did in the Navy, to volunteer in the Navy and to fight an incredibly difficult war against terrorism after that. We are here to dedicate ourselves. Now I know many people, even here in Somers Point, many people whose last name is Somers, who are direct descendants of the Somers family, don't even know what Richard Somers did or who he was. At first I believed that Richard Somers was a forgotten hero of America. But as we've been doing these ceremonies, I realize it's far worse than that. He is not a forgotten hero. He is an eliminated hero. He is an erased hero. Because the story of Richard Somers is the story of everything that was once great about America. And by erasing his memory, certain people who do not like America, by erasing the memory of what made America great, allows them to perpetuate the lie that America was founded as an evil, unjust, oppressive, warlike country. And for that reason, people can believe the propaganda that what we need is a fundamental changing of America. It was George Orwell in his chilling book, 1984, that was published in 1949, who explained all this. The hero, of course, of that book, a man named Winston, was a bureaucrat employed by the Ministry of Truth. It was his job to systematically go through all the old newspapers and photographs and history books and remove any mention of any person who was not popular with the current regime of Big Brother. That was his job. And around the world we see the Islamic State is now blowing up and destroying any records of any civilization that contradicts their version of Islam. And that, my friends, is why Richard Somers was eliminated from American history. Because Richard Somers, I won't repeat the whole story, Richard Somers came from an America where at age 10, every boy, every girl was expected to learn a useful trade. Why are schools off for the summertime? So that they would interrupt their studies to work in the business of their parents to learn something useful. Richard Somers at age 10 would sail boats between Somers Point and Mays Landing delivering fish, eggs, and other produce up the Mays Landing, up the Egg Harbor Township River. And anyone who has sailed that stretch today knows that it's a heck of a thing for an adult to do, let alone a 10-year-old kid. Richard Summers had the equivalent of an 8th grade education. He finished his schooling at age 16. At age 16, he mastered arithmetic, writing skills, history, basic science, literature. He could write, he could do business contracts. In short, at age 16, he had a better education than most Americans have today coming out of a 4-year college. Richard Summers then used the skills he learned here sailing boats to Mays Landing by getting a job by going into shipping cargo ships, by commanding cargo ships from New York to Philadelphia, and not only navigating without GPS or without radio communication, by hiring crews, disciplining crews, training crews, buying merchandise, selling merchandise, all those things at the age of 17 and 18. So that by the time Richard Summers joined the Navy at age 20, he had 10 years of experience of sailing and 2 years experience in business and shipping. And so when he went to join the Navy, those 20-year-olds had an amazing amount of experience and daring. Now, of course, they didn't have a Navy Academy in Annapolis at that time. The naval cadets got their training on warships. And they would be in the middle of the ship, which is why they were called midshipmen. And Richard Summers and the other 20-year-olds who joined the Navy got their training fighting French pirates in the Caribbean. And in 6 months, they amazed the world by wiping them out. In 1801, the Muslim terrorists of North Africa were unhappy because they weren't getting enough money to leave us alone. They announced they would attack Americans. And President Thomas Jefferson said, "Make my day." He sent the American fleet over to deal with those Muslim pirates, and the reaction around the world was laughter. The European powers had been fighting those Arab terrorists for 1,000 years. And the Muslim terrorists, they knew that if they died in combat, they'd get their 72 virgins. They were fearless, they were ruthless, and because of all the ransom money and tribute money they collected, they had access to the most modern weapons available in all of Europe. So that's why the French, the Spanish, and the British chose to pay off the pirates rather than, we call them pirates, by the way, they weren't pirates because they were doing what their governments told them to do, which was to kill or capture or enslave any non-Muslim that did not pay them tribute money. Ironically, they took more slaves were captured from Europe and sold into slavery throughout the Arab world than all the African-American slaves taken to America. In fact, these Arab slave ships went as far north as Iceland because on the slave market, blonde, blue-eyed girls from Iceland got the highest prices in the slave market, which justified the trip. So all of Europe was terrified by these Muslim slave traders, terrorists, whatever you call them. Today we would call them jihadists. So when America sent a fleet run by 20-year-old kids like Richard Summers, and by the way, Richard Summers was 21 years old when he commanded his own warship to cross the Atlantic and fight the Arab terrorists of North Africa. They called it a pack of schoolboys, and they laughed at them. But what amazed the world is this pack of schoolboys had such bravery, such resourcefulness, that within a year they completely defeated and crushed all of the pirate or the Muslim fleets, something the European powers had not done in centuries. In fact, Pope Leo VII made a public proclamation. He said, in one night, America in its infancy has done more to protect Christendom than the great powers of Europe in centuries. All that, of course, is forgotten. Now, what happened is, the tragedy of the Richard Summers story is all of the enemy fleets made peace with America so that American ships could sail anywhere they wanted in the Muslim world and not have to pay tribute to anybody. only one Muslim kingdom held out in Tripoli, because he understood American politics. He said, if I keep my fleet protected in the harbor and don't go out to fight the Americans, eventually the Americans will get tired. They'll get tired of spending the money. They'll bring the fleet home and we can start all over again. And he particularly knew that at that particular time, Thomas Jefferson, you see the portrait is on that mural, had just made a treaty with France to buy the great Louisiana Territory. So basically Congress spent all of its money to buy the Louisiana Territory and to protect the Louisiana Territory, and America no longer had the resources to fight this war overseas against Muslim terrorists. So the young naval officers got together, they said, what can we do to end this war now? And what they did a daring mission. They took one captured Muslim ship. They renamed it the Intrepid. They packed it with explosives. Richard Somers and 12 crew members volunteered on something that would be almost certain death. The plan was to take the ship, sail it in the middle of the enemy fleet, light the fuse, try to go in a rowboat to escape, and blow up the enemy fleet. Ironically, second in command was Henry Wadsworth, the uncle of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the famous American poet. Something went wrong. They did not succeed in their mission. The ship exploded, did not do any damage to the Arab fleet. But it did accomplish two important things. First of all, it impressed the Arab world and the Muslim world completely, because they had never seen Christians willing to put liberty and freedom and justice above life itself. They knew that in dealing with the Americans, they were not dealing with the English, the French, or the Spanish. The second thing is, when Congress finally did cave in and said, okay, we've had enough of the war, we're going to give you $50,000 to pay the bribes, get our captured Americans back, and forget the whole thing. When the $50,000 reached the American fleet, they knew the sacrifice that Richard Somers and his crew had made. They knew what Congress ordered them to do, and they disobeyed the orders of Congress. Instead of using the $50,000 to pay as a bribe, they used the $50,000 to hire Greek mercenaries to go together with the Marines, and they actually attacked the King of Tripoli until he finally agreed to make a peace treaty with America. So basically for the next 190 years, America was free from Arab terrorism and Muslim jihad because of his sacrifice and their sacrifice. It's a hot day. I don't want to keep anybody longer. Many of you have heard that story before. But we take this time to remember Richard Somers, and there will be a more comprehensive ceremony on Sunday, September 20th, in which that mural will be dedicated, and it will be a joint project of the City of Somers Point, the Somers Point Arts Commission, and the Somers Point Historical Society. I will be speaking at that event as well. And what is also very important, it's very important to remember that that after that we'll be having our fundraising event, so we can pay for the publicity to tell the people about Richard Somers. Thank you so much for coming out today. Oh, and now we're going to actually lay a wreath in memory of Richard Somers. So I'd like to have Charles Fisher, who helped create the wreath, to step forward, and together with Mark Hutchinson, bring it forward as we pay our respects to Master Commandant Richard Somers, born in Somers Point in 1778, died at age 26 in Tripoli, Libya, North Africa.
And had 4 naval battleships named after him.
4 naval battleships, and by the way, the oldest monument today standing in Annapolis is called the Tripoli Memorial, where you will see Richard Somers and his entire crew, as well as James Decatur and others who fought and died there as part of that monument. So thank you very much for remembering Richard Somers. If there's something I left out, let me know. Otherwise, I hope that everybody will be here again on Sunday, September 20th at 2 o'clock. Thank you.